Okay, so I'm the fool that didn't quite realize that Industry was releasing early because of the Super Bowl, but hey, here we now are 3 days later. With episode 5 of season 4 being released, this episode of Industry went international, with Sweetpea and Kwabena going to Accra in Ghana with the hopes of getting to the bottom of what was actually going on with Tender's operations there that had just fallen silent and where they were getting no response. Within this episode, there were deeper themes of purpose, looking for a sense of belonging, wearing masks, and coming to the conclusion that when you're chasing the highs of success, the very cost can be the family that you have and your own flesh and blood. So with that, let's dive into the episode. Here is Industry Season 4 Episode 5, Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Sweetpea and Kwabena. Sweetpea's hunger for success and uncovering the truth was something that was at the heart of this episode, all the way to the point where we saw that she was putting her safety on the line in order to do so. Uncovering the truth whilst in Ghana was something that was at the top of the priority list for her because she needed to taste some form of success, as she realized that without this, she no longer had any purpose whatsoever. Especially following everything that she'd been through in the past. She'd interviewed for jobs before working with Harper and she wasn't getting anything back, so it showed that it was quite literally this or nothing. During this episode, she found out that the operations that Tender had going on in Africa were quite literally a lie. The $50 million that Tender apparently paid to Swift GC didn't exist, as we saw when the abandoned derelict building which represented the HQ was quite literally falling down and the two security guards were just answering the phone and sending it straight to voicemail. This instantly showed that Tender wasn't worth the value that they were being priced at in the stock market. Tender were essentially lying to the world about their value so they could profit off of it. They were lying about the value of the assets in Africa, so it would essentially just increase their price. However, they also went one step further by not only lying about the value of the assets in Africa, but they were lying about the cash in general. The cash didn't need to be real if it was simply just floating around and was being spent in ways where nobody was truly checking. Tender had fake users, fake revenue streams, and fake cash. They were all driving each other and the lies were all dependent on the other in order for Tender to be able to get away with it, and that's exactly what we saw happening. Hence why there was no phone number for Tender in Africa that was public knowledge, and no address that was public knowledge either, because if anybody tried to look into it, like what we saw with Sweetpea, they were almost sent on a wild goose chase. This really was Sweetpea's episode because we saw her giving her all to uncover the truth to get to the bottom of the information that was being hidden. From the outside, it seemed like she was coping well and had gotten over everything that happened in the past. Kwabena even said how it's good that she's been able to move on. However, what we saw during the ending of the episode when she returned to her apartment was that she was all alone, she had nobody, she was in tears, and she hadn't truly moved on. The persona that she gave off was just as much of a facade as what the valuation of Tender was. She was suffering in silence, and it also brought to light that even the purpose that she thought that she'd find in the work that she was doing wasn't enough to keep her from not feeling like herself. Unlike Eric and Harper, she needed that human connection, something that she was now lacking. With Sweetpea getting Mr. Day a safe passageway to the UK, it feels like the information that he's going to eventually reveal to the press could be the very thing that'll lift the lid on Tender. However, as we saw with Sweetpea being threatened and attacked, it showed that Tender do truly have their eyes and ears watching and listening on all corners of the globe. Harper and Eric. Harper and Eric's arcs were two that I found particularly interesting in this episode, and this is because it basically stood for the complete opposite to what Sweetpea was doing. Harper and Eric were basically dying on their sword, more so Eric than Harper, but what we also saw with them was how they both lacked the ability to be stimulated by human connection. For example, Eric was frustrated with his daughter over the fact that she got expelled, but I feel he was more frustrated at the idea that he viewed his daughter and the time that he spent with her as a complete waste of time. He'd have thoughts such as, "What have you done for me today?" Even saying to himself that he didn't get fulfillment out of being around her, which is such a cruel thing to say and feel towards your own flesh and blood. He was tested morally when the lady from the hotel called him and he denied her call. However, at the end of the episode, when he found out that Sweetpea had got the dirt on Tender and that they'd increased their chance of uncovering the truth and profiting off of the demise, he called the girl back and met up with her, showing that at a time where he was fulfilled by what he truly wanted to be fulfilled by, which was money and success, his true colors would come out. He even said to her, "Make me feel big," and she responded and said, "Daddy." So it showed that he was willing to be the daddy in that situation, but not a true father to his own flesh and blood. He had questions and statements thrown his way during this episode as well, such as you give the girls everything but not what they need. You think if you're going to leave your girls some money, they're going to love you. And also, don't mistake regret for love. The girls won't. This showed how, even from an outside perspective, the lack of love that he had for his girls was something that was easily noticeable, and even the regret that he had was too. As well as that, what we saw with Eric was that he was the person out of Harper and himself that was more logical and was prepared to liquidate their company to cut their losses after it seemingly looked like they were going to mess everything up because Tender was seemingly airtight at that point. With regards to Harper, we saw that she was exhibiting similar traits to what Eric was. Harper and Eric are extremely similar people when it comes to the way that they act. They're relatively cold, they don't have much time for others, and they care about the highs of success. We even saw that when Harper found out that her mother died, she began to deal with it in her own way. She wasn't necessarily mourning her because they weren't really that close, but with her losing her mother, somebody so close to her and her acting in a closed-off way, it almost epitomized Harper's character. She cared more about potentially committing fraud and basically doubling down on the risk in order to expose Tender than the death of her mother, so it positioned her in a completely different way to Sweetpea. With her mother also passing away by simply falling down the stairs when going to open the door for a delivery, it also brought to light to Harper how easily life can be taken away. With Harper also finding out that Kwabena and Sweetpea were intimate with one another whilst they were in Ghana, it truly cemented to her that she actually had nobody. Harper's final piece of dialogue in the episode was, "If anybody calls for me, tell them I'm busy, I'm working." This really brought to light the fact that all she cares about is work and that it's her driving force and factor that keeps her going, almost her coping mechanism, because without it, she'd quite literally have nothing. With her now having the proof that Tender were lying about a lot of what was going on, she's going to have most of the ammunition to truly be able to go on the offensive, and after 2 episodes where we saw one from Tender's perspective and this one from Harper and Eric's, hopefully the 2 stories will begin to merge together. My review of the episode. I thought this was an okay episode of the show. I liked it because it felt like there were constant revelations that were taking place, there was action, and it was quite cool seeing the show in a completely different location. But what I will say is it did feel like it was a little bit too contained for its own good. We've had 5 episodes in this season, and 3 of them have felt like they've been in silo and in isolation from each other. There was episode 2 with it being focused around Henry, the previous episode with it being focused mainly on Tender, and now this one with Tender and the staff not featuring at all. I don't mind that approach, but with there only being 8 episodes, that's almost half where the story doesn't feel that connected. So I'm hoping the remaining 3 are going to be a bit more joined together. In terms of the performances, this was definitely Sweetpea's episode. The performance that Miriam Petchy gave was heartbreaking in all senses of the word because you could tell that everything that she was doing whilst out in Ghana was just a cover-up for the true loneliness that she was feeling. The emotional range that this character had in this episode, from being in hysterics at the end, but then also being a formidable force when in front of Mr. Day and, as he said, salivating at the speed in which the truth was being uncovered. The range was there to watch and just simply enjoy. As much as I did enjoy the story in this week's episode, I would have loved to have seen more of Rishi and seen what happened to him, rather than just hearing in conversation that he'd been arrested, was facing manslaughter charges, and that Jim had also died. It was such a good cliffhanger that we were left on last week, and I almost wanted to return to pick it back up again. I am enjoying this season of the show. I do just feel like the story is a bit compartmentalized at the moment. Now that Eric and Harper have the information that they need, it feels like the speech that Harper is going to be giving in next week's episode, it could bring about the beginning of the end for Tender and their operations. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see when the show returns next week. I imagine the ante's going to be upped even more. So, there you have it, Industry Season 4 Episode 5, Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos on Industry Season 4, then check the playlist below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. What did you think of this episode? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.